Welcome to Reconnection. I'm your host, Joanna. Today's episode explores the reality that many rare disease families face. That the public often misunderstands conditions that are genetic but not inherited. My guest, Jenny, is the mother of 4 children. 2 of her children, Avery and Paxton, were both diagnosed with rare genetic conditions, but with different diseases. Avery, who is now 19, has Phelan-McDermid Syndrome, and Paxton, who is 12, has Tatton Brown Rahman Syndrome. Um, both conditions occurred Denovo, meaning they were new genetic changes that were not inherited from either parent. Jenny received both diagnoses on the same day after exome sequencing and gene DX, which is diagnosis. It's hard to imagine what it feels like to receive life-changing news for 2 children at once. Since then, Jenny has turned her experience into advocacy. She serves on the board of CureShank, helping accelerate treatments for Phelan-McDermid Syndrome and other Shank-related disorders. She also leads the caregiver support group for the Tatton Brown Rahman Syndrome community and serves on the board of the National Autism Association of North Texas. Professionally, Jenny is a behavior analyst who coaches and supports therapists and parents working with neurodivergent children, bringing both personal and professional insights into her advocacy. Today, we'll talk about the challenges of raising children with rare diseases, what it means when a condition is genetic but not inherited, and how advocacy can grow out of some of life's most difficult moments. Can you tell us about, so Jen, can you tell us about your family and your children?
I sure can. Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be talking with you today. We're a family of 6, as you mentioned, and the best way to describe us is really just a little bit of everything. My husband, Brian, and I have 4 kids, and each one of them brings something completely unique to our family. Avery is 19, and she's our oldest child. As you mentioned, she has Phelan-McDermid Syndrome. Along with that, she has a lot of medical complexity, and she's non-speaking and profoundly intellectually disabled. She's really taught us what resilience really looks like. There's a quiet strength about her, and she just keeps showing up every day and loving us and connecting to us in the ways that only she knows how to do. My next oldest daughter is 17, and she's a senior in high school, and she's this incredible mix of driven and grounded. She's juggling academics, leadership, helping our family behind the scenes, and she does it with a maturity that takes my breath away. She doesn't have a rare disease, but she's definitely neurodivergent, and she's outstanding. My third daughter is named Presley, and she's right behind her and full of energy. She's competitive. She's involved in everything. She's deeply empathetic. She feels things deeply. She shows up and for people in ways that are just amazing. Then my youngest son, Paxton, as you mentioned, has Tatton Brown Rahman Syndrome, and he brings a lot of joy and laughter to our family. I think every day he makes us laugh. He doesn't read or write in like a typical way, but if you give him a microphone, he can remember song lyrics and he can sing and he'll light up a room just with his smile and his voice. He can be difficult with his behavior, but overall he's really a light and a joy in our house. Our family is really full. It's busy, it's complicated, and most every day it's pretty overwhelming. But it's also really beautiful.
Mhm. So it's good that you actually point out the things that your children are good at, and because not a lot of people think about that, and so it is a question I normally ask towards the end. But
Yeah.
um, so what
They're
led
human.
to? Oh,
Yeah,
good.
they're humans and they have beautiful strengths and just like everyone else. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
What led to the decision to pursue whole exome sequencing through GeneDx?
Well, for years we were trying to figure out what was going on with Avery. She developed normally for, I say normally, like, but she met her developmental milestones her first 19 months of life or so, maybe first 18 months. And she had about 25 words and was pointing and engaged. And then it was like she started to drift away from us. She stopped pointing. She stopped responding to her name. She stopped looking at us. She would have periods of regression in her childhood that just didn't make sense. And as a professional, this was hard because things that should have worked just weren't working. When she was about 3 or 4, we started pursuing genetic testing in the way of like microarray and fish testing, and they looked for Fragile X and they looked for Rett syndrome. We didn't actually see any genetic abnormalities at that time, so we just kept going. We met with a counselor who just said, you whatever she has isn't inherited. You can have more children. So we did because nothing was showing up on the panels that we did at the time. So we had our next two daughters who were healthy. Um, then Paxton was born when Avery was 8. And from the beginning, there were signs. He had clubbed feet. He had hydrocephalus. He had developmental delays. He failed his first two newborn screenings where they looked for T cells.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, so we were just really confused because these were different medical issues than what Avery had had. But at some point, it just didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It just felt like we were really missing something. And so, kind of at my persistence, talking to all the different specialists that we were being sent to, somebody said, "Well, there's some new advancements in genetics. You should go back to the geneticist." So we did, and that's what led us to whole exome sequencing. Um, was more about just finding clarity because we were really confused. We wanted to see the whole picture,
Mm-hmm.
and that
So these
decision
sort.
finally connected the dots
So
for us. Yeah.
oh, so were both children by the same parent?
Yes. They're both our biological children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you had them?
I was 28 when I had Avery, and I was almost 36 when I had
Mm-hmm.
Paxton. So
So the moment, like for the moment, like for you as what was that moment like for you as a parent?
the moment of learning about their diagnoses.
Yes.
Yeah. We got both diagnoses on the same day, and it was in a letter. It's weird to even say it out loud because for Avery at the time, she was 9, so it was kind of a relief, and it made sense. And I felt a little bit of a weight being lifted off my chest because now we knew we had direction. We knew what it was because we'd been trying for so long to kind of figure it out. But in this very same letter, in the next paragraph, was Paxton's variant explanation, and for him, I was devastated because he was only 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what the path looks like. I knew the appointments, the uncertainty, the advocacy, and just the weight of it all. It sounds bad, but my immediate thought was, I just don't want to do this again. I don't want, to watch my kids suffer and struggle. I don't want them to have to go through it. But it wasn't because of him. It was just because I understood how hard it could be. He's remarkable, but it just that moment felt like the ground shifted a little bit under me. At the same time, my kids were there though, and they didn't change. They're still who they are. Even in the middle of grief and overwhelm, my very next thought was, what do we do now? Um, so that moment held a lot of things at once for me. It held, relief and heartbreak and fear, and then really quickly shifted into determination. I will never forget that moment. I remember it. I remember where I was standing. I remember where I was in my house. I remember calling my husband and telling him to come home from work. But it was also a moment that gave us answers and ultimately a path forward. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So, as Avery has Phelan-McDermid syndrome and Paxton has Tatton Brown syndrome. What can you explain what these conditions are in your own words?
Yeah, it's taken me a long time to try to to try to learn how to explain them,
Yeah.
because they're really complex. And basically, Phelan-McDermid syndrome, which is what Avery has, and she's 19, is caused by a change in the gene called SHANK3. That particular gene plays a really important role in how neurons or brain cells connect and communicate with each other. So when your neurons aren't doing that, it impacts things like communication, learning, muscle tone, and a lot of other medical things that you wouldn't think of, like GI issues, sleep issues. And for many kids, I think it's up to like 75% or 70% of children with Phelan-McDermid syndrome, it overlaps with autism. Um, the way I think about Phelan-McDermid syndrome is that her brain is trying to send messages, but the connections aren't strong and they're not efficient. And so that shows up in every aspect of her day and in every way that she moves through the world. Um, for Paxton, he has Tatton Brown Rahman syndrome, and that is different because it comes down to how genes are regulating development.
Mm-hmm.
It is caused by a change in the DMNT3A gene on the second chromosome, whereas the gene affected on Avery's syndrome is on the 22nd chromosome. So Paxton's is on the second chromosome. And this DMNT3A gene helps control how other genes turn on and off. And so instead of just one pathway being developed, it's more like the overall instructional system is a little off. With his syndrome, he and most people with his syndrome share overgrowth. So that's being tall, as well as like obesity issues, developmental delays, intellectual disability specifically. I think 100% of people with Tatton Brown Rahman syndrome have some sort of intellectual disability ranging from mild to severe. And a pretty wide range of medical differences, including some links to different types of blood cancers and other types of cancer. So he's got screenings for those things. With Paxton, when I think about it, I think about his brain and body growing and developing on a different timeline and in a different rhythm than we expected. For instance, he's 12 years old and he's 6'1". He's really big. And he got like all of his permanent teeth by the time he was 9. So everything's just on a little bit of a different wavelength. So
Mm-hmm.
the diagnoses explain, kind of why, but they don't define who my kids are. They're still themselves. Their personalities are there, their preferences, their humor, and the way they connect with us in the world. Their diagnoses is just part of their story, and that it's not the whole story, thank goodness, but it's part of it. So.
So both these conditions are genetic but not inherited. How did doctors explain the concept of de novo mutations to your family?
So initially they didn't. We got the letter in the mail and it said de novo for both kids' conditions, but there was no, well, I think there was an explanation in the letter that said like neither parent holds this variant or something along those lines. Also written in the letter was something that said it seems incredibly, I think, unlikely and unlucky for one family to have two different pathogenic de novo variants. And the doctor wasn't being unkind. He was just acknowledging how rare this is to have two children with two different very rare diseases. That word unlucky landed for me in a little bit of a complicated way because these aren't statistics to me, they're my kids.
Yeah.
So I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I went into full analyst mode. I looked up every word, every gene, every term. I started reading papers and connecting dots. I started looking up, patient advocacy groups and how I could get connected with other parents. But there was some relief, I guess, from a de novo diagnosis, knowing that I didn't I didn't cause this. But I'm hesitant to say that because most people don't know if they are carrying a genetic variant that could be pathogenic. So there was a bit of a relief there, but more it was just a moment of beginning to understand and opening up the path forward. So um, that moment, led to everything that came next. And And our journey's been rocky, but it's been unique and beautiful too. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it is very rare for this to happen. That's why most people haven't heard of it. And
yeah.
unfortunately,
Most doctors.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
doctors get a paragraph in a textbook on rare diseases, which is why I'm doing
Mhm.
this. Um,
Yeah. Grateful
yeah.
you are. It's great.
um, so um, now, one of the researchers I just interviewed mentioned that there's now a rare disease voucher, which is giving a lot of ultra rare and rare conditions um, even more clinical trials now. So they're actually doing research, and so it
That's
is
awesome.
great. Yeah. So I mean, I'm finding a lot of the conditions that I've already interviewed have already talked about have clinical trials. So, and some of them I
Yeah,
haven't.
Phelan is in clinical trial for a gene targeted therapy. So,
Yeah. How good that you know about them. Says
yeah.
not everybody does. What are some of the challenges and strengths you see in your children? You
And
mentioned.
Avery and Paxton specifically, or all four kids?
Um, so in all four kids, um,
Yeah.
I think you mentioned some of them.
Yeah. Um, there's just so much strength in my kids. My my family has had to learn to become really flexible. So I think that we're all pretty adaptable and flexible. My older kids have had to adapt in ways that are really kind of amazing. My older girls have a certain, or not my older girls, my middle daughters have an empathy about them that I think is unique. They've seen their sister have seizures and have to be resuscitated. They've seen their brother have brain surgery and have to, be in hospitals for weeks at a time. You just can't teach that type of experience and connection that brings to a family.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so my girls also, though, have my middle daughters their strengths, they lead full lives and they have friends and activities in school and theater and sports. And so I think their superpower is to be able to move from one space to another and, still hold in their heart, a perspective that most people don't have. Um, Avery's strengths are quiet and they're resilient, and she can laugh through getting her EEG put on her head. She'll just giggle. Um, she also is very adaptable. We can take her anywhere. We take her on vacations. We can take her to movies. Um, Paxton too. He comes with us everywhere we go. He is flexible in most, big picture type events. He loves to sing. He loves to make people laugh. He loves to pull pranks on his sisters. He's a fun kid. They both are. And it's not hard for me to find their strengths. Of course, it's easy to describe their rare diseases, but it's just as easy for me to describe what amazing humans they are. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So, do you think they understand their conditions?
Paxton is beginning to understand his condition. He says things like, I have special needs. I'm not sure where he got that. We usually use the term disabled, but I think in school they use the term special needs a lot. He says he knows why things are hard for him. He knows that he can't read. He knows he has TBRS, but I'm not sure exactly that he knows what that means. He's getting there. He has a moderate intellectual disability. Not that it's a good measure of who he is or what he knows, but his IQ is about 52 last we checked. So
Mm.
I think he knows he's different. And I know he knows that because he desperately wants to belong and fit in. And he's in a weird kind of preteen boy stage where he will try to adapt to look like the kids look in his class and wear the clothes they wear and wear his hair the way they wear it. So he's beginning to understand. Avery, I'm not sure, has much of an understanding. Her intellectual disability is rather profound. and we haven't found a way to really tap in to understand what she knows. Sometimes she'll show us she's aware of what's happening in context by playing a video. Like she can only work a first generation iPad, but she'll find a video of Mother's Day on Mother's Day.
Hmm.
Like we'll be talking about it and she'll find one. She's probably got a library of maybe 200 videos on her first generation iPad. And she'll find a birthday one on one of a sibling's birthday, right? Or she'll she'll say, "Let's get out of here." Like she'll repeat a line on a show that tells us that she knows what she wants, which is to like we were stuck in a traffic, situation this week, and she kept repeating the line on the iPad, "Let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's get out."
Hmm.
And so that's the way she somewhat communicates with us, that and through physical touch. So we're not sure that she's aware of her disability, but everyone else in the whole world is, well, in our family is, and we try really hard to find unique ways to connect with her. So
So do you think she understands what she's saying as she's repeating it?
yeah, she doesn't say it with her own words. She just finds lines on videos because she doesn't
Hmm.
speak it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm not sure, but it's an awfully big coincidence if she doesn't. I think the skill she has there is matching. I think she sees the picture on her video of a situation like a birthday or Mother's Day or something, and maybe the language too, maybe the words, and matches them to what she's hearing in her environment and plays it in a way to like perhaps communicate she knows that what's happening in her environment.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that a lot of kids who are nonverbal understand what they're don't understand what they're saying, but can still speak.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. She doesn't have the ability to speak anymore. She lost that ability by the time she was 2. And I
mm,
actually haven't heard any consonant sounds from her since. Every now and then she'll hum or laugh or grunt. She barely ever cries. So the only times she used to cry was kind of when she was really hurt. So
mhm.
yeah.
So your middle daughters, Avery, I mean, your middle daughters, Kaylin and Presley, are supportive siblings. How has your entire family adapted to life with rare diseases?
We're still adapting. We just actually got back yesterday from the Tatton Brown Rahman Syndrome Family Summit in San Antonio, and my middle daughters were buddies. They had big pins on their shirt that said, "I'm a buddy." And so they were not only my son's buddy for activities like a ropes course and a foam party and karaoke and things like that, but they were buddies to all the other individuals who needed support as well. I don't think our families like mine ever really arrive at some finished version of coping. But we learn and we adjust and we stretch kind of over and over again. My kids know plans change, things shift, needs aren't equal. That's been a hard one. And they're not predictable. So that can be hard to hold, and we've all learned how to do that without it breaking us. Yeah, I mentioned before, my girls have an empathy that you can't really teach. They notice things, they step in, they celebrate really small wins because they notice that. We've had to be really intentional to celebrate their wins too, because it's easy to let caregiving and medical needs kind of get in the way of their just being teenagers. And so we work hard to
Hmm.
make it the support they need to. We fail sometimes, but other times I hope and I'm pretty certain they know that they're loved and celebrated and supported too.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of people think, of the older, uh, because you get older with a rare condition. I have one also. Um, my parents still think about when I was a child, and so they don't realize the evolution of, what's happened medically. Um, so, um,
Heavy.
yeah. So, what have your children taught you about resilience and perspective?
Wow. They've taught me everything. They
Mm.
Yeah, I think before I had children, I understood resilience in kind of a traditional way. You push through, you work hard to keep going. Um, my kids have reshaped that for me in a lot of ways. Um, it can be quiet. It doesn't have to be loud and visible.
Mm-hmm.
Resilience is showing up the next day and coming back when things are hard, finding joy in places that you don't think to look at. I always say our family, may deal with some macro sadness, but we survive it by all the micro joys and by noticing them.
Mm-hmm. No, a lot of people don't notice the small wins also.
And small wins are what make it happen for me because they accumulate over time. Um, and they help us show up as ourselves and do it again
Mm-hmm.
and remember that, what matters and what doesn't. So small things that used to feel big don't feel big anymore. Sometimes that translates into me having a little bit of a harder time having empathy for people's small problems, but I'm really working on that. um, but they've also taught me to let my kids have taught me to let go of timelines because I'm not ever giving up on them. Um, I give up on, but I can let go of expectations. Life doesn't have to look a certain way. They've changed my values. I think I
Mm-hmm.
used to value intellectual ability and things that our culture and our society value, and I've learned to value connection and just who people are, and seeing people's beauty and strengths, and knowing it doesn't always look the way that people think it's going to look.
Mm-hmm. And some people have like a jar that they keep small wins in and will review them towards the end of the year just to see what it's like. Um, so do you do anything like that?
I do. I call them glimmers. And so I would just make note of it in my notes section of my phone. So, and then I'll go back and look at it
Mm-hmm.
the end of each month. So,
So you're involved in several advocacy organizations. Can you tell us about your work with Shank and the Tatton Brown community?
yeah. I love talking about advocacy work, and sometimes I wish I could just do advocacy work, but it doesn't necessarily pay the bills. I'm involved in advocacy work in ways I couldn't have predicted because it didn't start, as a career for me. It just started as a mom trying to understand her kids. For CureShank, we focus on Phelan-McDermid Syndrome. And as you mentioned, we're helping fund research, push forward real therapeutic development, things like gene-targeted approaches and clinical trials. We CureShank has done a lot of the groundwork to set up that ability. I had no idea all the steps that have to be done in any disease, and rare disease is one of those, to get to a place where there can be a clinical trial. Um, for CureShank, I've personally had the opportunity to kind of elevate family voices and connect with families and have use their stories to educate and help researchers and biotech and scientists understand the importance of treating the disease. Um, I got to go to the NIH for Rare Disease Day and participate in that, and that still feels surreal because at the center of it all, Avery is just my daughter, and I'm there to support her, and I'm really through CureShank, we've developed startgenetic.org, which is something that's been really important to me to help educate families on how to access genetic testing, the importance of genetic testing, how to work with their doctors. And so um, that's felt really good to me because it kind of encompasses both of my kids' syndromes. Um, and for Tatton Brown Rahman syndrome, as you mentioned earlier, I I host the monthly caregiver support meetings with another moderator. And I just went to the conference, as I mentioned, and we hosted 5 different support meetings. And then there were some others hosted for siblings and dads that we didn't host, but we did the general support meetings, then we did the mom meetings. Um, so with TBRS, it's even rarer than Phelan-McDermid syndrome, and it was only identified in 2014, so it's newer. And that means what they're doing is kind of trying to build the plane, get everything ready to fly, to be able to be in clinical trial, to be able to move forward with targeted treatments. Yeah, because right now with Tatton Brown Rahman syndrome, so much of it is families kind of comparing notes like, hey, are you seeing this in your kid too? Do you see this? But they have developed a registry and they have done a lot of great work in the last 5 years to and more since it was identified, but to really set the stage. So
Mm.
uh, what ties both of the roles I play in those organizations is just this bridge between kind of lived experience and science. I'm not a researcher, but I understand behavior development and I understand families
Mm.
doing this every day. So I feel like my job for both roles is sometimes to help researchers understand the urgency and complexity of our kids' lives, help families understand that there's science there, and understanding that science doesn't have, you don't have to be a scientist to understand it, because sometimes it feels like you do.
Mhm.
Um, so helping them understand that in a way that feels accessible and hopeful. Um, my advocacy work is really all about connection. And I want to make sure no family feels alone, because you certainly feel alone when you get a rare disease diagnosis or somebody in your family does. And that's my whole point, is just trying to help people connect and not feel alone.
Mm. Yeah, it's part of another reason why I'm doing this. Also, it's so much more than a podcast to me, but it is more of a community. Um, excuse me. I will also connect by email and look up clinical trials and Facebook support groups. Um,
Facebook support groups have been really helpful over the years.
yeah, um, it's one reason a lot of rare disease patients will never give up Facebook.
That's right. When a lot of
uh,
my friends gave it up, but I just can't. I won't. So
yeah. Um, yeah, Every Life Foundation is also great. They will sometimes reimburse for advocacy trips, at least some of it.
yeah, one of my friends who's on the board for Tatton Brown Rahman Syndrome, she was also at the NIH for Rare Disease Day, and yeah, they helped send her there. So that
Mm.
was really good.
And they can also a lot of people don't know you can transfer paratransit services also if from other states. So a lot of times in like I had my I live in Oregon, and when I transfer my paratransit service to DC and other places also, but DC has a great service where you don't even pay for taxis. They're all covered. Um, the one place you might have a problem is if they don't do will calls, like airport situations. A plane can land at a different time than actually says it will.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
mm,
See how that would mess things up.
yeah. What support networks help you most helpful when your children were first diagnosed?
It wasn't really networks, it's people, because like you said, it was the other parents I was able to find like on Facebook, right? Or on
Mm-hmm.
other social media. So it was finding families that were a few steps ahead of us, who could say, we've been there, or this happened for us too. That kind of changed everything for me. Whether it's connecting with Phelan-McDermid Syndrome families or TBRS families, those relationships that started right away, but I had to initiate them. It took something that felt completely isolated and made it feel shared.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because it made me not feel alone. Um, because with rare diseases, like your local community doesn't always have the answers. You have to look further out somewhere. Some other parent might have some answers. Um, Early intervention was really important for us. The therapists have become, my friends, the specialists, the people who didn't just see the diagnosis, they saw my kids. That gave a sense of direction when things felt uncertain. It broke everything down into kind of manageable pieces. I'd also say recently, the medical and research communities have become part of my support network. the geneticists, the clinicians, the researchers willing to listen to the families and treat us like partners as they move forward in treatment options, that matters more than I could ever explain.
Mm.
Um, the most the most powerful support really has come from people who could sit in the complexity with us, who understood the challenges and the beauty and didn't try to fix us. They didn't try to minimize it. They just show up and love us for who we are, and that makes the biggest difference of all.
Mm. So, what are the biggest gaps families still face in the rare disease world?
The first biggest gap is time to diagnosis, like the
Mm.
diagnostic odyssey is what a lot of people call it. Families spend years in uncertainty and see specialist after specialist before anyone even suggests, looking at the root cause, looking at genetic testing. Um, a lot of people like us, we went years without answers, without targeted support, without access to the right care or understanding what to look for, what possibilities are there. Getting a name doesn't automatically unlock help, um, but and there's no roadmap when you get a name. And so that's a problem because there's not longitudinal data yet to show a roadmap, but it can be helpful. But I would say that's a gap. Another big gap would be access to care and research. Not every family lives near a major medical center. There's a big gap in rural communities versus urban communities. Um, Not every child qualifies for clinical trials, and even when treatments are being available, a lot of families don't know about it, and that's a big gap. A lot of them can't travel, can't participate, and that's a real barrier to progress within rare disease, I feel like. Um, Also, like just the day-to-day burden is often underestimated. I feel like the coordination, the appointments, the insurance battles, the financial strain, the impact on siblings, the impact on my marriage, the impact on your career. It's full time, and it's an invisible workload. And families are largely carrying that on their own backs. So that's big. I was thinking about this because I spoke to some scientists and researchers at the Tatton Brown Rahman Syndrome conference this week. And one of the biggest gaps is that I feel like the medical system and the researchers and the scientists still don't consistently center families or patients as partners.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and families and patients hold a lot of insight about symptoms and progression of disease and quality of life. Those perspectives aren't always integrated into their research, into care models, or into policy in a meaningful way. And that's a big gap. So when we try to close that gap, how do we do that? We do that through communication and through truly listening to families, and that's where advocacy matters, and that's what moves things faster. So those are the gaps that I experienced and continue to experience in this journey.
So, your work as a behavior analyst supporting therapists and parents working with neurodivergent children. Has your professional and background shaped your approach as a parent and advocate?
Um, there's no way to separate the two for me. My professional background and how I parent and how I advocate, it's all so blended together at this point. I was trained to look at behavior and development and try to figure out what's underneath it, what's getting in the way, what's possible. And that's helpful as a parent. Honestly, just becoming a parent, especially to kids with rare diseases, really shifted my lens in ways that I can't explain very well or expect, but it definitely softened me. Um, I think earlier in my career, I was so outcomed on outcomes and progress, and now I'm more focused as I hope I've been able to communicate. I'm more focused on connection and on understanding, on meeting my kids and other families exactly where they are, not where I think they should be or could be, just meeting people where they are. Because I certainly know from my own experience, progress isn't, you know, the way I think it's going to go. It doesn't always work that way. Uh, some of the most meaningful moments aren't measurable, and that's a big thing in behavioral analysis. But there's plenty of meaningful moments that I share with my daughter and my son that I can't measure. Um, so my background gave me tools like how to navigate systems, how to advocate in meetings, how to collaborate with providers and physicians. But my kids gave me the perspective. Um, so when I advocate now, I'm not really talking as a clinician. I guess I'm using those skills, but more I'm talking as a mom who's lived this because, we've been in hospital rooms, we've been in IEP meetings, and in all these in between spaces where we're just trying to figure it out. I understand the science a little bit. I'm learning more every day, but I also understand the stakes. And I think what really drives me pushing for earlier genetic testing, better access to support, real progress towards treatments. Because when you sit in that intersection between what you know professionally and what you live personally, um, you don't really get to step away from it. So it's all blended together for me. But I feel like, what it's helped me do is just become better in all of those different aspects of my life, hopefully.
Yeah. So now Medicare is also starting to realize the importance of video conferencing for those who travel a long ways for care.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah,
uh,
that has opened some doors in rural communities, and that's been really important.
so how far do you travel for care?
I don't have to travel very far. I live in the DFW area. I live near Dallas, Texas, and we have major hospitals around us. But we see some specialists in Houston, about a 5-hour drive for us, and we go twice a year.
Yeah. Texas is a huge state. So,
Yeah.
yeah, DFW is not my favorite airport. It
Yeah.
is huge. Uh,
They're very spread out.
it's gotten better over the years, but
Mhm.
still, I mean, at least they have the train system now.
Yeah.
Well, when you have to go from one end of the airport in 5 minutes, it's
You're not
kind
going
of
to
difficult. Yeah.
make
What research developments are you most hopeful about for these communities?
Oh, what gives me the most hope right now is I feel like for the first time, we're not just talking about managing symptoms, because that's what both diseases have been doing, what all rare diseases have been doing really is managing symptoms. We're talking about actually targeting underlying biology of these conditions, and that seems really important. On the cure shank side, with Phelan-McDermid syndrome, the progress with gene targeted therapies is really incredible. We're in clinical trial for gene replacement therapies that deliver a functional mini gene of SHANK3 directly into the brain. That's not just supportive care, that's precision treatment. And that's, an attempt to correct what's happening and at the brain level. And that's really exciting. That idea, if you even, 5 years ago just seemed impossible. And now it's something we didn't even imagine, and now it's a reality, and it seems really exciting. Um, ASO treatments, other small molecule approaches to try to tune into how genes are expressed and how synapses function. Even though they're not cures, they are also representing real targeted steps forward that again target that underlying biology of the disease. So it's also exciting that researchers are getting a better understanding of SHANK3 for Phelan-McDermid syndrome, how it works in the brain, and that just opens the door to multiple therapeutic strategies. Instead of just one shot on goal, we're hopeful for many shots on goal. So we're trying to, set that up in any ways we can. Um, with TBRS, they're earlier on that journey, but they've made some real progress. And since TBRS is tied to the DMNT3A gene, which plays a role in epigenetics, which is like I talked about earlier, how genes are turned on and turned off. That means in that broader field of epigenetic therapies, there's, some are being explored in cancer and other conditions. They may actually translate to meaningful treatments for our kids too. So that's exciting. Right now, a lot of the progress in the TBRS community is foundational. They've created natural history studies, they're data sharing, they're understanding patterns across patients through the registry. It's not flashy, but it's the groundwork that every future clinical trial depends on. And so TBRS is really doing an excellent job setting up that stage. So my hope lives in two places at once. And for Phelan-McDermid syndrome, it's this very real, tangible momentum towards gene-based treatments. They're already entering clinical trials. Like it's so exciting. It's also my daughter's 20, so it's a little bit, I don't have a ton of hope for her, but I have a ton for the next generation behind her. Um, and that's exciting. For TBRS, the growing recognition, the collaboration, the belief that ultra rare communities deserve and are beginning to get a seat at the table at precision medicine. That's exciting because that was also unheard of and seemed unrealistic that an ultra rare genetic condition would hold any interest for biotech. But hope isn't abstract anymore, and that's a big deal. It's really in the pipeline. So I'm excited about a lot of things in those areas.
Mhm. So many families managing neurodevelopmental conditions experiment with dietary approaches. Have any nutritional strategies played a role in supporting your children's health and or development?
We've tried a lot of dietary approaches for both kids, and I definitely believe there's a connection between what we put into our bodies and how our bodies function. I don't know of great science for either of my kids' specific diseases that demonstrates any change in the biology of what's actually happening with the disease, but my thought has always been I believe parents, and if they see that their children are functioning better on a specific diet, great, try it, do it. Take out the bad things in their diet. But but for my kids, rare diseases that stem from a genetic variant, I think the real hope for me lies in that.
Mhm.
But yes, diet is integral for all of us. And if my kid feels better, she's going to act better. If my son isn't constipated and isn't, um, you know, flushed or struggling, because of something he ate, he's going to behave better. He's going to learn better. If that's a barrier to learning or if that's a barrier to feeling well, then whatever dietary or nutritional things you can do to improve that, by all means, seek out the professionals who can guide you and do that. So.
Mhm. So, if another parent is listening who just received a rare diagnosis for their child, what would you want them to know?
Mm. I want them to know this, like the feeling they have right now, if they just got a diagnosis, that feeling, that confusion, that what does this mean for my child? Is this real? Um, you're not doing anything wrong by feeling that. Most of us didn't choose this path. Nobody sets out and wants a rare disease. We're dropped into it. In the beginning, it can feel like your world gets very small. Appointments, reports, uncertainty, insurance calls, trying to figure out the next steps. Um, but your child is still your child. The diagnosis gives you a new language, but it doesn't change who they are, their personality, their joy, the way they light up a room, the way they light up your life. Over time, your world will expand again. It does. It does expand again. It feels really small at first. Um, the the rare diagnosis, though, again, I said nobody wants it, but through it, I found my people. I've been able to learn things I never thought I would need to know, but it's expanded my brain. You'll move from overwhelmed to informed to empowered. You don't have to do all that today.
Yeah.
Right now, just take the next step. Love the child that's in front of you. There's going to be hard moments, and I think that's what most parents are thinking about when they read that genetic diagnosis or rare disease diagnosis. But there's also real, beautiful joy. Um, yeah. So they're not alone, and that there are people out there, ready and willing to listen and help them walk through this.
Yeah. There's a poem called Welcome to Holland. I don't know if you've seen it, but it talks a lot about what you're talking about. How, you know, you miss all the joys if you just worry about, what, um, what can happen
Yeah.
train.
It's
So,
easy to get
yeah.
pulled into the next, right? Pulled into the hardships. But, I think if I'd had a lens and could see what my children were like today when they were little, that wouldn't have helped because
Yeah.
I've adapted. You grow with them. And you don't have to do it all in one day. Like it's a gradual process. And if you don't take those moments to appreciate who they are and the joys and the everyday little things, little magic, then yeah, you will miss out.
Mm-hmm. So, see, Jenny, thank you so much for sharing your story today. And what really stands out
Mhm.
in this conversation is that rare disease doesn't always follow the patterns people expect. Both your children have
Right.
genetic conditions. They were de novo, and yet from something so unexpected. You've built advocacy, community, and support for so many families walking a similar path. Your story is a reminder that even when diagnoses are different, there are shared experiences in navigating uncertainty, in finding resources, and building a life around love, resilience, and connection. To everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, please make sure to follow and subscribe to our connection. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd also love to hear your thoughts or your experiences. I also do cooking videos. That end of things is Rare Chef. Um, and there is an underscore in between Rare and Chef. You can also follow Rare Connection on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. And if you're listening to the audio version, there's a send me a text link in the show notes where you can reach out directly. And as always, if you know you or someone you know is struggling, you are not alone. You can call or text 988 in the United States to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline or via chat 988lifeline.org. Thank you again, Jenny, for being here,
Thank
and
you.
thank you all for listening. Uh, watch out for the next episode on stomach cancer with Chef Chuck early next week. I will be filming it on Easter Sunday. Until next time, this is Rare Connection.